Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're asking the question, is the honeymoon over? And as you may be able to tell by the thumbnail, we're talking about AEW. Now, I do want to mention right up front, I am a huge supporter of AEW. I have been since the very beginning. I thought the idea was great to have another major wrestling company in America. Competition makes a business better. I've literally spent thousands of dollars going to AEW shows, buying AEW merchandise, much like WWE as well, and TNA or Impact. Either way, they're going back to TNA now. ECW before it, WCW. I'm a big supporter of pro wrestling. I have been called at times an AEW fanboy. I don't know at the end of the video if that's what people are going to say, and I really don't like to do negative videos and just talking bad about something, but I feel like it's got to a point where I kind of have to address it, and I kind of have to be honest with you guys on how I feel. Before we get into the meat of it, let's talk about some of the positive things, because this is going to be a little bit of a negative video. In the 4 years since AEW started, it has given us an alternative. It has given us some of the great moments in wrestling in that time frame. The rise of Hangman Page to becoming the world champion was a great story. Brody Lee, as Mr. Brody Lee, the leader of the Dark Order, was just a fantastic example of a wrestler reinventing himself and showing how great he could be. Unfortunately, that storyline didn't go as long as it maybe could have. And the biggest thing I want to talk about, and when you hear this, you may say I'm taking sides, which I'm absolutely not. AEW gave wrestling fans something that they wanted for 7 years, and that was the return of CM Punk. And yes, there's been controversy. Yes, there's been backstage fights, tribalism. You're either on the side of CM Punk, you're on the side of the Elite. I get all of that. But for that moment, a moment that a lot of wrestling fans, myself included, wanted to happen but didn't think would ever happen, they made it happen for us. If you take a time machine back to 2019 and you ask every single wrestling fan in the entire world who the one wrestler you'd like to see come back, even if it's just for one match, I guarantee you the overwhelming majority would say CM Punk. Or he'd win the vote at least. They've also given us stuff like bringing some of the greats of New Japan like Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Minoru Suzuki, and having them wrestle in America and exposing them to a wider audience. Now, with that being said, now we're going to talk about the meat of the story, the meat of the video, why I think the honeymoon's over. And it's a trope that you hear people say when things start going bad. I feel like there's a lot of times where the missteps of AEW over the first 4 years were kind of overlooked because maybe in the beginning they were a new company, or they were getting their footing, or the good outweighed the bad. But I think we've gotten to a point where there's some glaring issues, and I'm going to bring them up here and basically my feeling. The first one, and this is one that I see echoed a lot, and it really stood out over the last couple of weeks. First with Tony Khan bringing Ric Flair into the company, and then secondly with the Big Show's appearance on this last Dynamite that just aired before this video. And yes, I know it's Paul White. You may hear me say people by their names they're more known as, just because my brain is so used to calling them that. I mean, we called him Big Show for 20 years. And this is not a knock on Ric Flair, one of the great wrestlers of all time. In my top two, and my top two is him and Terry Funk, and they're tied for number one. Big Show, Paul White, fantastic career. A career that any wrestler would love to have. Did he switch back and forth too many times? Probably. But that's no fault of his own. Multiple-time world champion, multiple main events, deserving of all of them. But you look at these guys, and this is something emblematic of AEW as a whole. And they're kind of the poster boys of it. Big Show looked like he was having trouble walking. It looked painful to me. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see the guy that's just hanging on because he needs the money, which I don't think he does, or he wants the glory, or whatever it may be. And on that same token, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. We watched last year as Ric Flair had his last match, which I'm going to go ahead and say right now, we're almost guaranteed he's going to have some kind of match in AEW. And for anybody that watched that, I reviewed it and I was way more positive to him than I needed to be. The match was terrible. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he's Ric Flair, and Ric Flair should get to go out however he wants to. I don't want to see 70-something-year-old Ric Flair wrestle anymore. I don't need Ric Flair taking up time that could be allotted to some of the other wrestlers like Powerhouse Hobbs or Swerve Strickland or Miro that I kind of feel like get a little bit pushed to the back burner. Hell, even his son-in-law, Andrade El Idolo, should probably get more of the spotlight than Rick is, and we should be building him. And these are two of the guys that are kind of an example of where I think they have a huge problem. They're starting to get that stigma like TNA had back in the day, where they'll basically pick up anybody that WWE releases. You know, some of them they've had massive success with. Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley. Well, Jon Moxley's contract went up, he wasn't released, and same with Danielson. Christian Cage has done a lot better than people expected, probably the best example of one of those guys. But now we're seeing someone, speaking of Christian Cage, his partner, Adam Copeland, aka Edge, or formerly known as Edge. And I like Edge. I'm a fan of Edge's. I was happy to see him return at the Royal Rumble a couple years back. I was happy to see him get a good run for his last run in the business. Much like I said with Ric Flair, he should be able to go out the way he wants to. Edge has kind of been a dud to me, and he could turn this around. We're only a few weeks or a month into Edge being in AEW or Adam Copeland being in AEW, so he could turn this around and have a stellar run here. But you look at him, and he looks old, and Paul White looks old. And Ric Flair, if they look old, Ric Flair looks like Methuselah. They need to be more selective with who they bring in and why they bring him. Yes, bringing someone like a Swerve Strickland, absolute no-brainer. Bryan Danielson, no-brainer. Claudio Castagnoli, no-brainer. These are people that wrestling fans feel like didn't get a fair share, and maybe now that they're in AEW, much like a Kurt Angle to TNA, you can really see them excel. Or even Christian to TNA back in the day. We kind of got that feeling that it's just anybody that gets released is going to AEW, and it was supposed to be an alternative, not just WWE rehashes. Speaking of this, our next topic, a seeming lack of focus at times on certain wrestlers, certain gimmicks, certain pushes. I've said this before, and I've said it in several videos. Way too often in AEW do we get a start and a stop to a push. Hell, I don't think we ever had the blow-off match between Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee that we deserve to have. We get people that are World Tag Team Champions or Television Champions, TNT Champions, 1 week, and then as soon as they lose it, we don't see them for a month or 3 months even. We get guys like Miro, guys like Powerhouse Hobbs that are seemingly beloved by the fans, but you can never really put them in a solid storyline. And I thought part of the reason why they had Collision was to push some of that different talent on Collision, which they have to some degree. But to me, the lack of focus, it kind of hurts the product, and it hurts some of their best assets. People like Kenny Omega, who's in this long-going feud with Don Callis, and I get it. He's raising the bar for Takeshita, he's raising the bar for Hobbs now, and whoever else is in the Don Callis family. But Kenny Omega should be in the main events and should be challenging for world championships. We just seen a great match he had with MJF. This is where he should be. He should be in that mix. Yes, it's okay for him to go do other feuds from time to time. Speaking of Omega, his elite partners, the Young Bucks. I absolutely love the Young Bucks. If you go in my bedroom, you could probably find at least 15 Young Bucks shirts, if not more. I'm looking at 2 sets of Young Bucks Funko Pops that are on the other side of the room from me. I have Young Bucks figures. I love the Young Bucks. They have never felt less important to the company than they do right now. And that's really weird to say when we talk about one of the best tag teams of the last 2 decades. And yes, I know they're polarizing, and yes, I know there was a big split between the Elite side and the CM Punk side, which I do not take sides on. I like them both. I wish it never happened. I wish it could have been worked out. But the Young Bucks have never felt less important than they do right now, and the tag team division in AEW has never felt less important than it does now. We have great teams like Proud and Powerful that are broken up, and I understand why that happened. FTR seems to have a lack of focus. The Acclaimed are in the Trios division. The Guns are in the Bullet Club Gold angle, which is great. I love that angle, but they're not really focusing on chasing for the tag team championships, which tag team should do. And it's kind of taken away from the focus on that division even. And it's heartbreaking because they have so much talent there. The Young Bucks should be in some kind of story with somebody. Their 7-match series against the Lucha Brothers was amazing. Their matches against FTR, fantastic. There should be some story that you could put the Young Bucks into. I don't know why there isn't. And we're going to address this. I've addressed it several times before. This also leads into the women's division. I want to say that I think they're doing a bit better with giving just a little tiny bit more to the women, but we're still relegated to mostly one match, maybe a Toni Storm segment on Picture in Picture, which Toni Storm is one of the best characters they have right now. Capitalize on that. But other women seem to fade in and out of the mix, whether it be Willow, whether it be Athena, which yes, I know she's on Ring of Honor, whether it be Britt Baker, Ruby Soho, Sky Blue, Anna Jay. They all seem to be there one day, gone another. Like Nyla Rose. Nyla Rose is absolutely fantastic. She should be their Awesome Kong. I mean, she's got the talent for it. She's a fantastic wrestler. She's a great promo. She should be in there and portrayed as such. And again, I know I'm not the only person marching up this hill, but they really, really need to give us focus on the women's division. I've said it before, I don't need it to be 50-50. I don't need 3 men's matches, 3 women's matches. But I would like to see, when we get to a pay-per-view, more than 1 women's match, more than 2 women's match on an 11-match card. If you have an 11-match card, there should be at least 3 women's storylines that deserve to make it to that pay-per-view, in my opinion. Especially now that we're going to monthly pay-per-views, even though they're not officially announced at. And that brings us to our final thing that I think is driving away fans. And it's something I think is a super easy fix. The special announcements, the big announcements, that Tony Khan has a big announcement on Dynamite. We just seen his big announcement was they're selling tickets for next year's All In. That's not a huge announcement. That's something, it's great. I want to see him do well. I want to see him sell out Wembley again. But did that really need to take 5 minutes of your show that could have been given to a backstage segment with, I don't know, Sky Blue? Why not? Did it really need to be there? Do we really need announcements on a tournament for a number 1 contender or this and that? That's why you have announcers. The announcers can say all of this. You can only cry wolf so many times or yell that the sky is falling till people stop caring that you're yelling that the sky is falling. And they've gotten to that point. The next time Tony Khan says there's going to be a special announcement or a big announcement, nobody's going to care because they've not delivered on enough of them that you're not going to care. And that's where I think the big issue is. I think there's a big disconnect, and I want to see them right the ship. I want to see them get some of these things right. And I think a lot of it is that Tony Khan's just overworked and not willing to accept help. But I hope he does take some of these criticisms that are out there. I know he doesn't respond well on Twitter, but hopefully internally he is responding well and he's looking at himself and reflecting what can be fixed. I mean, the ratings are continuing to get lower and lower, which is not a great sign. They should be getting bigger and bigger. And yes, I know there's down periods. WWE has down periods too. And if WWE was having a down period as much as AEW is now, I'd be making a video about them. But I think AEW, with everything that I've said, I think they've taken a lot of the benefit of the doubt, the honeymoon period, and taken it out of it. And I'll leave on this one final thing. The one storyline that they cannot mess up is the devil. They need to absolutely, positively nail this story. It needs to be somebody that the fans care about. It needs to be somebody that may or may not be a surprise, but it should lead to a massive feud with that person and MJF, who MJF is carrying the ball very well. He's oftentimes the bright spot on the show. But they have to nail this. Whether it's Adam Cole, which most people seem to think that is the most likely option, and I think it's the most likely option. Whether it's something out of left field like CM Punk, which would be absolutely insane. It would drive the wrestling websites crazy. Wrestling Twitter would blow up. Everybody would be posting it. I would be making videos about it. Cultaholic would be making videos about it. Going in Raw would be making videos about it. You get the point. It would be something that was hugely talked about. So I don't think it will happen, but it's something that, again, would make that storyline really jump out. Having it turn out to be someone like, say, Dolph Ziggler debuting, or Jack Perry returning would just be so deflating to the fans and just another nail that I think would turn away a lot more people. I really hope they right the ship because it is a product I like. I do enjoy the shows more often than I don't, and I really like Collision a whole lot. I think Collision is a little bit of a better show than Dynamite right now, and that could just be because I love Kevin Kelly and Nigel McGuinness on commentary, which I think adds a whole lot to it. But I hope they right the ship. I know the honeymoon's probably over, but that doesn't mean that it can't be a successful marriage going forward. And if you made it here to the end, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member definitely helps out. If you made it to the end here, let me know one thing that you would fix with AEW down in the comments. It doesn't have to be super negative. It could be anything from the way they have seating to the push of the women's division, like I said, or a specific wrestler. Maybe you do want to see Jungle Boy as the Devil. But let me know down here something you think would help out AEW. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat video.